Good morning. It is Tuesday, and it's early at my house. It's only about 7:15, but I've been up for a long time. I fell asleep early last night, and I woke up early this morning. So I thought as long as I'm up, I might as well go ahead and read my grandchildren a story, which is what I like to do, because it helps me feel like I'm getting closer to my grandkids, even if I can't see them. I see you in my head, in my mind, and in my heart, and that's really what counts. I hope everyone had a good day yesterday, and I hope you're looking forward to having a great day today. We are reading a book today. It's a large book, and that's another reason I thought we needed to get started early so I could get it read for you, at least as much as I can. And it's called Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey, and I think it's going to be a very good book. All right, we'll go ahead and just get started. I think I showed you this the other day, but look. There's an egg and then a little crack, and it gets bigger and bigger, and out pops a little ducky at the end. A duckling is what I like to say, or a ducky, that's also good. This is Make Way for Ducky. Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. He's written a lot of books. He wrote Lentil, Homer Price, Centerburg Tales, Blueberries for Saul, One Morning in Maine, Time of Wonder, and Bert Dow, Deep Water Man. I haven't read any of those. I haven't even heard of any of those, but I do have Make Way for Duckling. So here we go. By the way, this book was written in 1941. Let's just count. 51, 61, 71, 81, 91, 2001, 2011. So this book is 70 plus 8, 78 years old. This book is almost 80 years old. Let's see if it's still good 80 years after it was written. Now, let me explain first that a mallard is a kind of duck. It's colored, very colorful duck. It's green and white and brown, very, very colorful. In this book, it's only brown and white because this book is not in color. So you have to think of the colors in your head. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. But every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. They were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles, so they flew on. Because foxes and turtles are dangerous for birds like this. They steal their eggs out of the nest and eat them. So she didn't want to take that chance. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard, so down they flapped. They were in a big city called Boston, and they saw a park with a small island in the middle of it, and they decided that was where they were going to sleep for the night because they were tired of flying. The next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Look, they dove under. Look. There's a duck with his head underwater, and there's a duck with just part of his head sticking out of the water. They were looking for snails or worms or food to eat under the water. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on the back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast better than the first. Look, there was a boat with a big swan with the driver of the boat sitting inside the swan. That must have been where the steering wheel was kept. And there were a lot of people on this boat driving around the pond looking at the sights. And they were nice enough to throw peanuts into the water for the ducks. Let's see what happens in this picture. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be get better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted at last that Mrs. Mallard had found a place to live that suited her. But, oops, I think these kids are going to scare these ducks. Let's see. Look. Yeah, the kids went by and it scares them. "Look out," squawked Mrs. Mallard, "all of a dither." That's how they used to say upset in the old days. In 1948, they would say, "all of a dither." "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." The bicycles scared them badly. So they flew on. Let's see where they are right here. That looks like a large building. Maybe it's a state capitol. So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Lewisburg Square, but there was no water to swim. They're flying around Boston looking at the sights and seeing if they can find a place to live. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts, "that looks just like the right place to hatch ducklings." They were flying over this island in the middle of the river, and they thought that looked like a good place. "You see, here's a bridge where cars go over the river." So they chose a very cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest, and only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. Molting is what happens when an animal like a duck loses all of its feathers or its skin and grows new skin. Like, for example, a snake may be small when it's born and it just has a small skin, but it'll lose its skin and then grow new skin. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. Look, they found a nice policeman who would feed them peanuts. His name was Michael. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs and keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. You see, here's Mrs. Mallard sitting on her nest with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 eggs in it. Let's count to 8 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Did you count with me? Can you count to 8? I'm sure you can. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack, then Knack, and Whack, and then Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. They named all of their 8 ducklings with names that rhymed. Let's say them again. Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack. That's fun to say. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to go take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children," and she did. He left her in charge of the children. I'll bet you your daddy leaves your mommy in charge of you a lot of times because they go to work. But of course, Sharda goes to work too. She has twice as hard a job as Austin because she has work and she takes care of the children. But I'll bet you Austin is a pretty good daddy, too. I bet he helps quite a bit taking care of Maya and Anya and Avi. Just like I know Carl helps take care of Manny and Ruby and Rex. Because every time we've been over there during the quarantine, they're out in the front yard playing, and there's Carl helping them out to play, making sure that the streets are safe and that they don't get run over. That's a hard job. The mama duck taught her ducklings how to swim and how to dive. Both very important things if you're a duck because you live on the water and your food is under the water. You have to know how to swim and to dive. She taught them to walk in a line and come when they were called and keep safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. She was teaching her children how to grow up in the world that they lived in. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. They were going for an adventure. I wonder where they went. We'll see. That's why we have reading. That's why we're reading the rest of the book. They were there when they got to the other side. They waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Wow, the highway has a lot of cars. I wonder how they'll get across. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk went the horns of the speeding car. Quack went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 quack went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. Look, they wanted to get across, and the cars just kept coming. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Oh, there's their friend the police officer, and he came to stop the traffic. Or maybe he just came to stop the ducks. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross the street. Oh, the policeman stopped all the cars, and there goes Mrs. Mallard and her 8 ducklings across the street. Well, that's just about halfway through the book, and we're going to find out tomorrow what happens when they go into the city. It ought to be fun, but for now, we're pretty much out of time. So all I'm going to tell you is what I tell you every day, and that is have fun today, be nice to your brothers and sisters, and play with them because everybody needs a good friend to play with. And most importantly, and I say this every day, listen to your mommy and daddy because they know best, and what they tell you is for your own good. So if they tell you to pick up your toys, what are you going to do? Pick up your toys. If they tell you to eat lunch, it's time to eat lunch and you better eat. And if they tell you to play nicely with each other, that means quit arguing and fighting and play nicely, because during this day and time, your brothers and sisters are the best friends you have. They're the ones that are with you all day long, and they're the only ones that'll be with you all day long for the next few days anyway. So have a good day, play nicely, do what your parents say, and remember, Moo Moo and Papa all love you very much. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.